Jim Campbell. This match ended West Ham United 0, Newcastle United 1. It won't be remembered as a classic, but it is a big win for Newcastle United nonetheless, all things considered.
Very much so. And I think it's actually one of those wins where when your own team get an away win like that, it's so satisfying. So satisfying. West Ham did a really good job at sort of limiting Newcastle having many chances of kind of high value. And so for Barnes to kind of pick Bruno Guimaraes out of a sea of bodies, for them to score the goal in the way they did that's brilliant. You know, that is a really hard fought and well earned 3 points there. And I think despite the fact that it, wasn't quite a classic for the neutral, even though it was under the lights and it was Monday night and Campbell and Speller are watching West Ham and are going to talk about it. They've treated us fairly well on Reacts this season. Despite the fact it was kind of none of those things, I think it will be a really, really satisfying win for Newcastle fans.
Yeah. Do West Ham ever get to watch their team on a Saturday afternoon at home?
They seem to be always
on Monday Night Football, don't they?
They do.
Well, they were on it again, but they didn't manage a win this time. But yeah, I know what you mean about that hard fought victory. You've got the cup final coming. It's that part of the season where you just need to get some momentum to finish off the last few months of the season. And there are other teams around Newcastle that are showing a bit more of it with regard to finishing as hard as possible in the European places. Much has been talked about Brighton's recent run. Villa are picking it up again. Nottingham Forest, big win for them.
Arsenal slipping down there to get involved.
Arsenal. I think Arsenal were doing a great service for the neutral here in the Premier League because they're thinking, those lot above us, this is boring. The fun is really for those European spots. So they want to get involved. But yeah, a big win for Newcastle. They're sixth. Now, Newcastle, again, at the turn of the year, or whenever it was, went on a great run of form up until that Bournemouth defeat at home, of course. And I, for one, thought, here we go. They're on the march, Champions League place all the way.
Yeah.
And then they had a bit of a blip. And other teams, as I say, started getting results. So this one is crucial. Again, 1-0 away to West Ham. No one is going to be talking about this in years to come, I wouldn't have thought. However, that's not what it's always all about. A clean sheet is always pleasing. And they did score a lovely goal as well, to be fair.
But that's what I mean. I think the goal is an expression of quite how difficult this game was. I don't think there was a clear-cut chance, really, in the whole game, was there? And they still managed to craft the goal.
If Kudus had actually had a go towards the end of the first half, but he wanted to take it back onto his left foot. So, yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, Barnes had an effort early on in the game, which I thought he did actually quite well to show a bit of poise and to manage to flick it on goal. It was a difficult one to take.
And Souček in the first minute as well. I'm forgetting that because it feels like years ago from this point.
Yeah, I think Souček's chance in the first half would go down as a bad miss. But one thing I did enjoy was a couple of moments from both goalkeepers. So Areola makes a decent save from Barnes. And then when he clawed out that one that was heading into the top corner, would it have been a Max Kilman own goal?
I believe so, yeah.
I think that's a contender for save of the season.
It was amazing, absolutely amazing.
It was stunning.
We often talk about the different phrases that you use for the way players finish, like a chip and a dink and all these different things. But a claw is very much a goalkeeper's version of that, isn't it? You don't see it quite as often as you see a lot of other saves, and that was a textbook example.
A leap and a claw.
A leap and a claw, and that was looping in as well.
Yeah,
that would have been a really annoying goal to concede.
Well, it was the reactions. It was David Raya-esque reaction.
It was
because obviously the ball is fizzed in, and you think to yourself, if you're the goalkeeper, okay, the defender's got this. Well, of course, it cannons off him, and as you say, it's that loop that can be so unpredictable and so difficult to judge. But my goodness, do they do save of the season in the Premier League?
I think they do.
If they do, why are we never told about it? Or is it just me? Because goal of the month, of course, is something we all enjoy on Match of the Day and so on. And then at the end of the season, we all tally that up, and then what's going to be goal of the season? I can't. Unless I'm
pretty sure
mad.
that they do it, but I suppose I think even goal of the season sort of recedes into the memory quite quickly now, doesn't it? Because we're all just so fatigued by the end of it. Just like, okay.
Yeah, I don't think. I think save of the month might be a bit much. Okay, like as I say, right. Well, now we've got goal of the month. Okay, fine. We'll all enjoy that. Save of the month. Little bit overkill, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah, possibly.
Although, having said all this, you're right. I'm pretty sure I have seen a compilation, probably on Match of the Day on the BBC, of for save of the season.
How about claw of the season?
Well,
Let's go really go the other way.
Yeah. Again, though, David Raya at Old Trafford,
it was a good claw.
or against I forget who it was. Was it Aston Villa?
Yeah, there's a brilliant save against Villa. I'm not sure that was as much of a claw, but I mean, there'd be contenders. You know. Go really niche.
A parry and a recovery, maybe. I don't know. That was, but yeah, I got a glorious save nonetheless from Areola, who came up right at the end to try and get an equaliser for his team. If you'd have managed that, I'll tell you what, Alan Smith on co-coms would have gone, I have given man of the match to Bruno Guimaraes, but I may have to reconsider this. But
yeah.
Of course it wasn't to be.
We're also desperate for that to happen every time a goalkeeper goes up. But what I loved about it was when the ball kind of came back down West Ham's end a bit, there was a point where he considered going back into his goal and he's like, nah, I'll stay up.
Yeah, just in case. Well, I did say that the both goalkeepers did things I very much enjoyed. And Nick Pope did. He did a diving header.
Yes, he did quite late on as well.
Proper diving header to clear the ball, which is it's always enjoyable to see a goalkeeper head the ball, but a diving header as well is lovely to see.
I feel like West Ham had about 1,000 shots blocked by Newcastle defenders in one way or another. I'm counting that Nick Pope diving header within it. They were very, very resolute defensively themselves, Newcastle, actually, which they deserve a lot of credit for. Thought West Ham were quite underwhelming from an attacking sense. It may just be because Newcastle were just so organised and so disciplined in not giving them the space they needed to sort of create anything other than that Souček chances we've spoken about as being that meaningful.
Yeah, I think West Ham, they started the game very well, as you say. Souček had that opportunity which he blazed over. But it quickly fizzled out, didn't it? And then in the second half, kind of the same as well.
Yeah.
They started quite quickly. You thought, okay, there's a bit of something here, but again, fizzled out. And I suppose it was a predictable performance from Newcastle United in that they've got the cup final on the weekend, but you can't just phone in a performance, and that would be very unlike any Premier League side. Certainly, Eddie Howe wouldn't be having any of that. But it's still a tricky task. Your mind is going to be on the cup final. They're already missing at least two big players. That left hand side, Lewis Hall is going to be out. Probably for the rest of the season now, isn't it? Isn't he? Due to injury, Anthony Gordon, of course. Such a shame that he's not going to play. So, it's a tricky one for Howe because he doesn't want to wind them up too much. Because you get any more injuries, especially in the centre of the pitch with those three crucial midfield players, you think, bloody hell, we have a real shot at glory here, a shot at doing something incredibly special. But at the same time, you've got to keep your integrity. You've got to keep your position in the league. As I say, every point matters now from now to the end. So I suppose with that in mind, I was a touch disappointed that West Ham maybe didn't attack a bit more. As I say, it fizzled out quite quickly. I know it's a tricky task against Newcastle, and they're solid and they're always difficult to play against. But I did expect more or I hoped for more from West Ham, although people might say, well, bloody hell, have you seen them much this season? Yeah. So maybe it's not such a surprise.
It's funny, isn't it? Because even though they lost the game tonight, you can still see the improvement that Graham Potter's brought into them. They're a lot more compact. They're a lot harder to break down. But you're right. It's sort of, it gets to that top end of the pitch and it all kind of breaks down a little bit. I thought Kudus had a poor game, actually. I thought he overhit things a couple of times and he made the wrong decisions on a few occasions. And this was sort of the problem that Graham Potter has had in the past. And it's also a problem that West Ham have had in the past, isn't it? It seems like a sort of almost an imperfect storm, potentially, for it to be a really kind of blunt experience at the top of that West Ham attack. It's interesting to see Evan Ferguson come on so late as well. He's not had a moment there yet that's kick-started it, has he? And it'd be very interesting to see if maybe he'll get a run in the team now. I understand he would have been, essentially breaking into a winning team were he to start. But maybe it's a time to throw him in from the start.
Yeah, I don't really know what to make of poor old Evan Ferguson's sort of situation. You remember, of course, when he burst on the scene at Brighton, and it was a huge chat about him, whereas he hasn't really found his feet this season, hence him going on loan. Difficult to come in to West Ham at this moment in time. As I say, they're trying to figure out what they're doing under Potter and so on and so forth. And a loan move as well for a player who, especially a young player who's taken into different surroundings. You know you're going to be there for 6 months, unless they sign him permanently, but who knows if that's going to happen. So yeah, when he came on, I just remember thinking, yeah, it's more minutes, let's see. But I didn't think much would happen. That's not a comment on his talent, of course, because clearly he's got something about him. But I hope that whatever happens after this summer, I mean, it'd be great if West Ham signed him on a permanent, because they've been crying out for somebody up there for a little while now, and see if him and Potter can click and do something. But I wonder about him. But I appreciate he's not really the story here in this game. He was just a bit part player. But yeah, West Ham, I think you're right to say that they've improved a little bit under Potter. I think most people would agree with you. I think any chat of, I mean, this is partially due to the three teams in the relegation zone not looking like they're ever going to get a win again in the Premier League. But any chat of relegation or anything like that, they've steered the ship away from there, certainly. And for West Ham United, it is all about just getting to the summer, finish as high as you bloody can, and then regroup and see what's going on. Because there's chat now that former Newcastle and Manchester United sporting director Dan Ashworth is in talks with them now. It's always interesting to see where he's going to pop up. Yeah. Very, very, very highly rated as a sporting director, of course. Worked with Potter at Brighton as well.
Mm-hmm. To great effect. Obviously did a decent job at Newcastle, hence Manchester United going all out for him. Now, the fact is he only lasted a handful of months there. That's not really a reflection on Dan Ashworth. No. I think we can all agree. So this summer, I think, is going to be big for West Ham. Or at least that's the idea, certainly. But I don't want to get too far ahead because we're still in the here and now. So I think, would you expect, Jim, to see more of the same really from West Ham until now, until the end of the season? Almost a bit like Manchester United as well, kind of feeling their way. Potter's sort of thinking, right, where can we improve? What's going on here? What do I need? And looking at some players and figuring out what's good and what's not. Yeah, essentially, I think that is really all they can do, because they're not going to bother the European places. They're not going to go down. They find themselves in a bit of a weird situation. They went into this season with a lot of hope, not unreasonably, because everything seemed in place for them to kick on and to perform well and all the things we expected. That hasn't really happened. Potter comes in with the potential to be the same, but he almost has the benefit of the free hit of the rest of this season, really. Now, I imagine there will be quite a lot of business happening at West Ham in the summer, because they do have they have quite a lot of older players in the squad who I imagine will be moved on, and obviously if Dan Ashworth comes in and they get the band back together, it could be all kinds of talented Ecuadorian teenagers that no one's ever heard of sort of rocking up and just changing things. That's a very, very exciting thing for West Ham, isn't it? Because we've seen that you have to be a bit clever with how you make your signings and where you do your scouting. And if you look at Brighton and Bournemouth and so many of the teams that are thriving in the Premier League, it's because their scouting networks are smart, and they buy these players relatively cheaply and turn them into stars, and et cetera, et cetera. We've seen it many times before. There is every reason that West Ham would be a really, really attractive proposition to those sorts of players.